So hello, and welcome to the Business Spotlight series. Today I'm joined by Stuart Lordan of Lord Panda Properties, and we're going to be talking about what he does in his business. He's the managing director of the business, and a little bit of some insights into the market and the various challenges that Stuart has faced and overcome in recent times. So Stuart, welcome to Business Spotlight.
Thank you for the invite. Very privileged to be invited onto this podcast. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's hope that lives up to your expectations on the privilege. But thank you for joining us. So Stuart, I suppose the best place to start really is a little bit about your business and how you got into it. What would you care to share with us?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I do a number of different things, but my primary business is a company called Lord Panda Property. And essentially we invest in and develop co-living properties. So we do that for students, although that's reduced over the last few years, given certain elements that have happened in economics over the last few years, given COVID and everything else. But we also do it for working professionals. So essentially what we do is try and put very design-led properties into the market for students and working professionals is it in a nutshell. And that encompasses a lot of other stuff, but that is what we do as a business. I also work with existing landlords to take on their properties and manage it on their behalf and do the same sort of thing. So essentially we have two elements to the business. We have company owned, so properties that my company buys and rents out, and company leased, where I lease from other landlords and sublease it on their behalf. So that's my primary business.
And is there a particular demographic with where you're doing this? Certain areas that you focus on?
So we do this predominantly in the Southwest, in fact, mostly in the Southwest, simply because that is where I started the investment journey 10 plus years ago. And as we built the contacts and knowledge in that area, we kind of just kept that momentum. So I myself live in the South near Gatwick Airport. So it's proven a bit of a challenge, to be honest, more and more of a challenge the older I get, but that's where we're based in the Southwest. Around a university town.
Okay, fantastic. And where did your interest in this kind of field first originate from? What got you started?
Purely through an existing property that we had. So my wife had a property, and when we moved in together, we were looking at selling it. My version of the argument is that I said we should keep the property because over the long term it would benefit us. And we managed to keep hold of that property and rent it out, and then the value of that did increase. And it just showed me that property is good in terms of an investment for the owner, and also gives you the opportunity to put something of value into the marketplace. So my sort of modus operandi is I like making things better. So when we were going out to properties and looking at developing properties, it was, would I let my own children stay in these properties? And if the answer was no, could I make it so? And I quite like that element. The last property that we did is very, very design led. And, you know, we got a local artist in to spray paint the walls, all new furniture, all en suite. And as my wife tells me, it's a very different student landscape to the sort of property she stayed in back in the day. Now we try and raise that level much, much higher. So it's about property as an investment for ourselves, but also how can we create better living environments for the customers that we're going to serve.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, you're right to say that the student landscape has changed quite dramatically, hasn't it? And certainly in terms of expectations as well. And I think I resonate with your wife's comments about the type of property that they've been back in the day. But if you could go back now to sort of the beginning of this journey, knowing what you now know about the market and the challenge that you faced, what do you think you might do differently, or what might you have changed along the way?
The first thing that I would have done, as boring and as uninteresting as it sounds, but before I started my business, I would have really focused on bringing all of my own costs down, my own cost base, if you like, so that our expenditure wasn't high. When I started my business, we still have 3 children, but my wife was also pregnant. So we had three children, pregnant wife, and as you can imagine, the costs have only increased as time's gone on. And that placed a bit more pressure on me getting momentum and revenue into the business. So I would definitely focus on my own personal costs, my household expenditure, and then also take that through to the business itself and really focus on the costs. Because what I've seen, as simplistic as it might sound, is that bringing costs down has a much bigger impact on the bottom line than necessarily driving revenue. And I was a lot more focused on driving revenue into the business than I was on costs. Several years later, I'm now as focused on cost as I am on revenue, and that is something I would have definitely changed in the early years.
I think lots of people, when they set out in business for themselves for the first time, they're driven by a passion, aren't they? Or they're driven by something that they're good at, and hopefully it's one and the same. And it sounds to me, from the way you described it, that you very much went into something with a very clear idea. I don't wish to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying is the sort of the business fundamentals, the foundations weren't necessarily in place in the way that perhaps they would be if you were starting out again. So obviously the cost basis, but also perhaps projecting forwards in terms of cash flow forecasting and things like that. Would that be a fair assumption?
Oh, I think that's an absolutely fair assumption. And yeah, I think when I started out, there was just this, I don't think it was an active thought, but with the benefit of hindsight, I think I was just thinking it's all going to be fine. It'll all work out in the end, And I didn't necessarily have those words, but that was kind of how I acted. But the difference is, certainly in the last few years, very much so, I've got, spreadsheets and software that project my cash flow for at least 2 years forward, so that I know any costs coming out today or any income coming in today or tomorrow, I can see how that impacts the business in the next month or 24 months. And that is a big, big difference to understanding how the business is going to fare moving forward.
So you're looking forward, you're not just simply bringing your experience to date and replicating it, but you're actually looking at how the situation may change going forwards and how you may adapt to it, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And that is born out of necessity. Number one, because I need to feed the kids. So, when I'm employed by myself, it's knowing what I can do in the next few months. But then equally, from a purely business perspective, it's understanding, okay, if I see an opportunity or I want to invest, if I put that money in an investment now, how does that impact my business moving forward? So we can be a lot more, I guess, independent of and more realistic about what we're going to do, rather than just hoping things are going to work out. We're a lot more intentional, was the word I was looking for. So we can be a lot more intentional about what we do, rather than just literally hitting and hoping.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I suppose, you're in a marketplace that's changing very rapidly, everything from interest rates to legislation, etc. How do you manage that without a crystal ball? How do you do the best that you can to kind of anticipate what challenges may be ahead?
Well, it's a bit like you say. I mean, what we do is we work with what we've got. So in the cash flow forecast, if anything change, I mean, when I hear the words energy, I literally shudder, because that has been, yes, interest rates have had a massive impact as well. But to be honest, the energy costs in the business have more than doubled in the last 12 to 18 months. So all we can do is make sure that we have our finger on the pulse of that. So as soon as that changes, again, we use the cash flow document without getting repetitive, just to see how that impacts the business. And then, of course, that informs what we do next. So how do we mitigate these issues coming through? What can we do? So if we can't change the cost, if we're on the lowest tariffs that we can, what can we do? Okay, we can look at bringing technology into properties like timostats, where they will measure usage in the household. What can we do within the existing rental contracts? Can we set ceilings on the usage that the tenants have? And yes, we can. And then how do we manage that? So it's really about focusing on the things that we can do within the context of the environment that we're currently in. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. In fact, that sounds like a really important message to any business owner, isn't it? really. You operate within an environment that largely you have no control over. And it's very easy for us to kind of look back and think, oh, woe is us, or we've got all these challenges. But it sounds very much to me as though you're saying, well, look, we're working within a situation. What is within our power? What is it that we can do going forwards? And I'm sure you and I would both encourage anybody in business to, to always take that perspective. It's about strategically planning, isn't it? About strategically looking forward and not just being reactive to events. So I suppose that links quite nicely to my next question, which is, for people in your sector, in the property sector, what misconceptions do you think perhaps people may bring to that when they're setting up a business?
The first thing that springs to mind on this is that, and I think this is driven by the sector and the advertising that we see on social media or wherever else about the sector, is that it's easy. And my firm belief is that any business is not easy. And if you walk into a business and expect it to be easy, you're going to have a rude awakening at some point, probably quicker rather than later. So that is the first thing, is that, business in property, it's not easy. It's tough. But then my belief is that any business that anyone is starting out is probably tough. People seem to get attached to big ideas, things around Facebook or Tesla or Elon Musk, and even some of those examples actually took longer than people might think. But these are the unicorns of the world, as opposed to what typically happens to businesses. And I'm genuinely pleased that my business is now approaching 7 years old, and that we still exist, because I know the stats on businesses that make it to 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years is not that great. So don't expect it to be easy. Is my first thing. Is I think that's a misconception. Expect hard work along the way, and perseverance is absolutely required in business, and certainly is in property from my experience.
And I think linking back to something that we were discussing earlier about having the right foundations in place going forwards, because it may not be easy, but it's easier if we've got a sense of what our business needs to look like and what it needs to be for us as well. Would you agree? It's the business is there for us, is it not? It's not the other way around, which is how many business owners often find they're trapped as slaves. So no, I think that's very common sense advice. So if you are working hard, as you suggested, how are you managing the whole work-life, family, business running balance side of things? Do you have any particular advice to anybody about how they might approach that side of things?
I think it's going to be a perennial challenge for everyone. As I say, I've got 4 children, lots of other activities going on around. So it's tough. I don't think there's a silver bullet, but you touched on the word plan previously. And I think for me, that is one of the biggest ones. In fact, something I've been going through with the kids. I've got one of my children is heading into GCSEs, and 2 other children who are twins also going to be following very shortly thereafter. And I keep saying to them, planning is key, because once you plan, you can fit things in around it. If you don't plan, the stuff or the detritus of life will just fill up very quickly, and you won't achieve whatever it is. So for me, planning is really key. And that was a big change for me, probably after the first year or so, was creating the vision, setting the goals, creating the long-term time frame. So once I had a plan, I knew what the most important things were, the big rocks, or whatever anyone wants to call them. For me, they're big rocks every quarter. So I know at least if I'm achieving those things, we are heading towards our goals. That also aligns with my family life, because there are certain things which I say are non-negotiable. So if it's my youngest's sports day, that is a non-negotiable. I won't miss that. That's why I created the business I created, so I could be more flexible. So there will be family events that I won't miss. I'm not going to say that I don't still work late or don't sometimes disappear on a Sunday afternoon, because that can happen, but very infrequently. But for me, planning is key for that, and sharing that with the other half makes things a little bit easier, and try and do it as much as I can. And that's the only way we manage it, really, is just through trying to plan as best we can.
Stuart, I really like that response. And what I like about it, 2 things really. One is you referred to the box, pebble, sand analogy about doing the most important things and addressing the most important things first. but you didn't distinguish between business and personal life, because well, how can we? You know, they fill up our time, you know, equally, in terms of priorities. So yes, putting the family rocks and the business rocks together into one pot, and I think that's some very, very good advice. So I'm going to finish with one final question, which is, what do you enjoy most about what you do?
That's a really good question. I love the freedom of working on things that I've chosen to work on. And I used to work in corporate life and actually really enjoyed it. I didn't not enjoy it, but I think for me, it's the words I always have is around the freedom. And of course, you know, as you know, when you have your own business, sometimes that can be a bind, and the freedom that you so crave has disappeared, and it's been of our own making. But for me, it's the freedom of choice of working on the things I want to work on, because I know, and it's not so great on the bad days when you're really struggling. You go, well, whose fault is this? Oh, it's me. Like, who's the boss here? Oh God, it's me. But for me, it's the freedom and working on the things that I choose to work on, and that is, for me, that is the greatest gift. And but to be really clear, it's not always like that. There have been some dark times where business has been so tough, where I've considered that it might not have been the right choice. However, you know, you come through it, and you know, again, really, really enjoy having a business that I wanted to build, and that is, yeah, that's the greatest thing for me.
That's fantastic, Stuart. It's been really good listening to your advice, your perspective on building a business and running a business, and thank you for some of your shares. I've really
No, thanks
enjoyed
again for
talking
inviting me
to you.
on.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much.